We were right here. I tried, but I mentioned school board and they got scared over there.
I think that we used all of our favors up.
Right.
They're always giving us stuff. For
They
Mexico
feed
Day.
the staff for like $50.
And Mexico
They're very
Day,
good to us.
Mexico Day, they donated all the chips and salsa for the entire third grade.
Wow.
And queso.
Wow.
And Jay and I eat there every Friday when I call it like your usual. They should just have it ready.
That's funny. All right, I'd like to call to order the Bloom Carroll Local School District Board of Education meeting on March 9th, 2020. Roll call, Mr. Biggett, please.
Mr. Abbott,
Present.
Mr. Bratton,
Present.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Present.
Mr. Rod Johnson,
Present.
Mrs. Sherman.
3 pledge allegiance, led by Mr. Rozeski.
I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Number 4, approval of the agenda. Anybody have any questions or concerns?
I looked over it, I thought everything was fine.
No addendums, so.
I make a motion to approve it. Okay. Second.
Motion made by Mr. Abbott, seconded by Mr. Jimmy Johnson. Travis?
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman, Mr. Rod Johnson.
Yes. Number 5, approve the minutes from the following meetings, the February 10th, 2020 regular meeting and the February 26th, 2020 planning meeting. I didn't notice any changes. I went through both of them. I haven't seen anything. Does anybody else haven't seen anything?
I did not see it.
I will make a motion for this. Motion made by Mr. Rod Johnson, seconded by Mr. Matt Bratton. Travis?
Mr. Rod Johnson,
Yes.
Mr. Bratton,
Yes.
Mr. Abbott,
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson,
Yes.
and Mrs. Sherman.
Number 6, public participation with the intermediate school with Mr. Rozeski and staff.
Good evening, everyone. I'm doing something a little different with my presentation. I thought instead of just listening the whole time, there's some people I want to bring here just to share all the good things they're doing, but also to kind of recognize them. I have Ellen Craner here, who's our Title I teacher, who moved into this position 2 years ago, and you guys, some of the board members have been on here previously. We made changes to it to where the Title I only works with third grade, just with the third grade reading guarantee. And you know, Ellen has really done a lot with the program, and I just wanted her to kind of share some of the things she's been working on this year. And of course, she has a handout for you. It's even colored, you know, so.
Thank you. Sir.
I only have a couple minutes, I need a handout just in case you were interested in what we do. With my position, now I do small group pull-out with intervention for reading, but also Mr. Rozeski and I sat down and talked about what our visions were for the position moving forward, since there was a new person in the position. We wanted to go ahead and foster a love of reading and try to incorporate as many reading activities we could within the entire third grade classroom, just because I think that's going to foster, you know, better readers. So the first thing that you see on the page is called Cookies and Books. This is a program that we did this year. I also went to Wagnalls and asked them if they would like to host it, meaning use their building for free, and also bring in that piece that goes in with the community, because Wagnalls is an excellent resource for books. They have reading with a dog on Wednesdays, they have book clubs. And so what we did was there was stations, and all the kids participated in reading stations. While the students were doing that, I actually met with the parents and showed them what LLI looked like, which is what reading program we use for intervention. I also spoke with them about what programs, what things they could do at home with their child. My students are ones that haven't passed probably the third grade guarantee. They're also struggling readers, so just giving them lots of ideas of what it should look like at home, what can they do to help out at home. And then they actually get a tour of Wagnall's and all of its resources. And my coworkers volunteer their time to work on the stations, so it's all the third grade teachers, and Mrs. Freestad also comes, the aides have done that in the library and donate their time to come and help with the stations also. The previous year I did it at Wagnall's. It was called PJ's Cookies and Books. The pictures aren't in here just because we had them for this year. Last year we both did them in January. Next year we're actually going to incorporate that and do the entire third grade student body with doing it with the third grade guarantee in September/October. So, and it'll be in our building, and once again, we'll have stations and things for parents. And then we have cookies and books for that night, and then we're actually doing an entire book study. We just started, this is last year's pictures, we just started today for the entire third grade, The World According to Humphrey, and the entire third grade is reading this series. They have reading logs at night. There's all kinds of activities that go with it, and just to foster everybody's love of reading. There are more books in this series, so it gets them hooked on the series, and there's like 4 or 5 other books that go with this series. And then the last thing I wanted to run through, I know I'm talking fast, but I only have 2 minutes. Co-teaching with the third grade teachers. I get to co-teach also the side small group, which is new to this position. Mr. Rozeski thought this would be an excellent thing to incorporate. I love working with the third grade teachers because I've taught for so long. I think we play off each other really well. One of the activities is I read a book. This is the snow globe family. And then the kids create their own snow globes, and I incorporate writing activities with it and connect it to the content standards. And so the entire Mrs. Walker's class is the one that did this one. And then in Miss Severine's room, we read the nonfiction book, Pop, the Invention of Gum. It's about the guy that invented bubble gum. And then I use that to incorporate it with math content standards, and we do bar graphs and pictographs on how many bubbles can you blow in a minute. And then we also do what's your favorite type of bubble gum, because there's all different types of bubble gum, so it's also showing how we can relate books to math. Believe it or not, then they want to check all these out at the library. The nonfiction one that goes Snowflake Betty goes with the snow globe. And then Mr. Rozeski was nice enough to let me get Marvin and James series. I do read alouds in my co-teaching. Miss Severine and I co-teach this, so we read it out loud for 10 minutes, and we work on character traits and all kinds of content standards when we actually do read aloud. The kids wanted to get the rest of the books in the series. Mr. Rozeski bought them for our school library as well as the teachers, so they can check them out, and I think it really fosters them really getting excited about reading, because that's where I got excited about reading, was in third grade with my third grade teacher. And that's the first time I ever remember liking a book, is Willy Wonka the Chocolate Factory. And that was the first time I ever loved to read. And so I tried to foster that same thing with our students here at Bloom Carroll. And Mr. Rozeski is always nice enough to get me whatever books we want using our resources. And the kids have really loved this new series. It's an old series, but I just found it and really lends itself to a lot of content standards of character traits and context clues, which is something they need to work on no matter what, whether they're high or low readers. So, and Corinne.
Ellen, I just want to, Mr. Crane, I should say, I just want to personally, commend you on everything you've done the past 2 years. The results that we've had coming from that third grade guarantee is just phenomenal. And I know you spent a lot of personal time on that as well.
Yeah, I have a team though of
in
people
your team,
to help.
you guys have just done phenomenal, and that's just awesome.
Thank you. Yeah, so the team is really receptive to whatever ideas that Mr. Rozeski and I would like to do, and the kids benefit from all of that.
She will come in sometimes and say, I had this idea, I'm like, well, I have this idea, and we merge them together. And one thing she also does is she does some of the professional development with the staff. She will come present at a staff meeting, sharing a reading strategy, and she'll put it together. I'll say, hey, Ellen, there's a staff meeting coming up, and she's like, okay, I have a strategy I wanna talk with them about, and, and it's really good, because then the teachers walk away with something. And when you have teachers who've been here 5 years to 25 years, I don't think we're ever too old to learn something new. And our educational assistants participate also because they're working with the kids directly too, and they find things that can work too. And I truly value the work she does. That's why I wanted her here, for you guys to really see. And I know that you guys recognize what she does, but the times where she meets with parents, she sent an email or a phone call on the weekend. She's given out her business card. Parents will contact her. They'll call the school and want to speak to her directly. So I think we're very blessed in such a small district to have such a great resource. I tell her she's not retiring, but we go out together, because I can't imagine doing this job as a principal without Ellen and everyone else. I mean, Ellen makes it a great community work. So.
Mr. Springer, I have a question. What was the attendance by parents last year compared to this year?
Last year, we changed testing the way that we did it. We did Iowa test first in December, whereas last year we did it in January. So there's actually a little less than there was last year, but that's only because there were less students. Last year, we started out with 58 students this year coming in on a reading improvement monitoring plan, which was a lot more than it was the previous year. Once we took the Iowa in December, the numbers went down. I don't know what the exact numbers were, in the 25, 26. So there's where the less numbers. I would
But
like
percentage-wise,
percentage-wise, a lot of people want to come. They want to get strategies. They want to see what their kid does. And I think by the time we get to third grade, we need to work as a team with the parents in order to get our children to be successful in reading, especially once, as you have a third grader. Once we get to the third grade, a lot of the basics are gone, and I'm gonna need their help as well. So we all need to work as a team, and I think that's important. And as a parent, you wanna know who can help me, and I want to be that person for them, because
It's stressful. That third grade year, unfortunately, the stage grading system, it's stressful on students, and you see the effect on their parents too. It's reality. There's nothing we can do except comply with the law. But Mr. Rozeski and his entire staff, just not third grade, but also fourth grade, do a great job preparing our readers, and the students that need the intervention assistance are getting it, especially third grade. Ms. Kramer, her classroom, she's a small group room right up at the top of the stairs here, and obviously we struggle sometimes with the setting sometimes in this building and being out of space, but Ms. Kramer has really created a classroom that the students get excited about, and that they're doing fun things, but it's how you decorate it with them, invite them in with the book.
It's funny
you mention what you've done with some of the classrooms.
The tree.
Your wooden tree, that's it's so cool.
When I heard I was gonna be this reading intervention, I asked if I could have the room up there, because it was closer to my coworkers than it was out in the modular. And when I got there were boxes up to the ceiling of just random stuff. There was stuff everywhere, and I don't know, it was not looking good. So I took everything out and painted the walls, and I had a tree made, and it's a wood tree, and its limbs hold all the books that I put on, and you can check out books in my room, and it's a huge wood tree, and it just holds all the books, and it says, reading is tremendous, be a tremendous reader. And then the carpet looks like leaves on the floor, and then everything is decorated with quotes, be the reason someone smiles today, because I feel like if you can promote an atmosphere of kindness as well as reading, I think that. Then there's one that says pause to read, so which is going to be our reading slogan for next year for our third grade guarantee meeting. That's why I wanted, Mr. Rozeski and I talked about moving it to the beginning of the school and including all third grade students, so that some parents can get reading strategies earlier rather than January. But it's a huge undertaking when I do an entire building as opposed to the small population, so it takes a little bit longer.
I do have one comment.
Uh-huh.
My daughter Marla was part of that.
Yes. I don't like to say, if someone's, because they
So
hit the
her
whole.
biggest, she passed the test, well, she
Yeah.
went in and she was all upset because she wasn't gonna get to go back to your class.
Yeah,
Okay.
I try to make it so exciting to come to my room that other kids wanna come. And we talk about, Mrs. Lister's students, which, kids talk, that they consider that bright. And I said, you know what, that's an intervention group. And they said it is, and I said, yeah, their brain works this way. So they have Mrs. Lister, and that's why she's a specialist in the brain for that. I'm a specialist for the brain for this, and then there's Miss Harrison, she's a specialist for your brain, and they start to look at it that way, and I think that's the beginning of fostering, so that when we get to middle school, there's not that, as much stigma attached to that kind of thing. And I have students that I eat lunch with, like Mr. Rozeski does, that will invite students that are not on my caseload, and they come, and then they fight to get who gets to eat lunch, or can I come to your room? I've actually brought students that are not on my caseload to my room for a day or a couple days because they want to come and see what we do there, and then they want to stay. So
Mr. Rozeski just called me today, and he just received some results about the third grade reading guarantee, and as was mentioned in the presentation, we had a smaller percentage of students and lower number of students that after the fall test needed to get that promotion score to move on to fourth grade. That's taken in October for new board members. And then we have other opportunities throughout the year with the Iowa test. There are about 7 opportunities throughout the course of the year that students can try to get that score through math assessments, Iowa, state testing, and Steve and his staff have done a great job, and it's good that we continue to whittle that number down, and it's a little smaller than it has been in the past. And this
Yeah, this is by far one of the best years
Yeah.
we've actually had. I think we've got a good system going.
Mhm.
And I will say one of the biggest things I heard this year when we had our parent meeting is we actually had a parent who said to another parent, I just happened to overhear this, do what Mrs. Craner says and your child will pass. And I thought, as much as we want to say something like that, but to hear a parent say that, it was perfect. So again, I just, we're very blessed and honored for all of her hard work, and she works very hard.
Thank you.
Keep it up. Great job.
Thank you so much.
All right, the next two I have here, this is Cheryl Ardrey and Aaron Freestad. They are teaching our STEM special. I will tell you before they even present, these two should have their teaching license. They belong teaching kids. Just like Ellen, we're truly blessed to have their skill set. The time they put in at the end of their day working on things, they've come in on the weekends and just different things like that. And last year, on my wish list item, which is on this year as well, you guys approved $1,000 to purchase STEM supplies. So again, I'm gonna have them kind of highlight some of the projects they've done with the kids this year, so you can see what they're doing with the resources that you're helping provide.
I'm the 4th grade STEM teacher. I'm Erin Freestad. I really enjoyed working with the students this year. It's so fun going into the room and then coming up to, what are we working on today? They're so excited, which is really fun. I have a science background, so I really enjoy using some of that. We kind of use a STEAM model more than even just STEM, which is science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And we try to touch on it throughout the year. I brought 2 projects that I really liked that I thought showed some of the things we were doing. The first one was about animal adaptations, which is in the 4th grade curriculum. And so we tried to use some of what they're already studying, if it works in. And we talked about animal adaptations and some of the terms that they're using in our vocabulary, like predators and prey. And I started this, and I thought, we'll read these books. It kind of works into some of the reading things and things like that, and they love this series. It talks about if you woke up one morning and you had a different animal's tail or feet. So they love this. So I read these 2 books the first week, and I said, just jot down some notes on some animals we're going to use later on the next week, anything you find interesting that really speaks to you. And I was so amazed by their work. So I read each page, and I said, we talked a little bit about it. And by far, this is what happened. They filled in both sides with all the facts. They loved this. It was really, really fun to see what spoke to them. They just wrote down anything they could get. and they were able to put it into their own words. I'm just reading it to them orally. They were able to process it, write it down, and use it again. So it was really neat to see their work on it. Then the following week, we turned it into a project where they had a little body that they could decorate, and then they got whatever animal tail they wanted and whatever animal feet they wanted, and they put it together. They could decorate the habitat that the animal lived in, and then we had them explain a little bit about why they chose that animal. So we uses some of the information they got from the book. So I really like that project because I was so impressed with how well they did with being able to take notes. That's such a big skill. I thought, how are they going to do it? If they got one or two things down, it was going to be fine, but they really did a nice job on that. The second project I brought was one we did around Thanksgiving. And I said, we have a little friend that's going to come and he needs our help. And so I said, Turkey needs to train for Thanksgiving so that he wants to be able to get away from the farmer when he's in shape. So it was funny, they were like, American Ninja Warrior, smart races. I'm like, exactly. So we talked a little bit about what an obstacle course is, and then I always give them a sheet, something like this, that tells what our challenge is. I call them challenges just because I feel like it gets their interest into it. And then I tell them what their supplies are going to be and what they can use. And then I put the criteria, and we talk about what's criteria, something that your project has to have. And we talked about, this one was in groups, and we talked about what does it mean to work in a group, and how do you show that, and they've gotten really worked well with each other. So that's been a good skill. And then we use the design plan, which we think about what the question was, what our plan is, and then they get to draw what they think, and then they can get with their group and display. So this was just one of the projects that I kept, because they all want to take it home too. And we talk about how we decide who gets to take it home. But they were able to follow all the criteria. It had to have at least 5 obstacles, it had to have a start and a finish, and the arrows. So they really liked that. But we tried to do some engineering, some building. We've had some nice supplies with Legos and building tools and things like that, and it's been fun watching them really grow, so we appreciate Steve's support of us. Awesome.
I'm Cheryl Artery, and I teach the 3rd grade STEM class. And we do the same as far as following the design process of the ask, the imagine, the draw, and then how can we improve it at the end. We try to use the curriculum a lot. We use the Journeys book, and there was a story in here about the Golden Gate Bridge. It's called Pop's Bridge, and it told a lot about teamwork and construction and the engineering, different jobs that are involved in bridge making. So I gave them the challenge of, with limited supplies, to build a bridge that this truck could go over, and it had to be able to sit on it plus go over it with these limited supplies. And we talked about budgets and time management and all that kind of thing with jobs. We talked about the jobs that are involved inside of the bridge making, so that if they were ever interested in those types of careers. And we came up, there was so many, it was hard to choose, but I picked the ones that I thought would stay together the best to get here. So this was the flat one, but it was they put the 2 desks together, and they had this actually sitting in between the 2 desks, so it was a suspension bridge. And then this one was the trestle with the triangle shapes. We talked about the strength of the triangle and how it's the strongest. And I had some QR readers that we use the iPads with, that they were able to go over with their iPads and learn all about the strengths of bridges, how they're made, the different ones around the world, the history of bridges, all that. We also have a design worksheet, and in this particular one, it was to ask, so they talk about the knowledge that they know before we talk about the story, and read the story. Then they imagine, they draw their bridge, they plan it, and then they talk about if it was successful or not, and then how can they improve it if it was not. So that's what we did with that one. And then this one was, we read the story, I want a new room. And this is about a boy that, he wants a new bedroom, because he's got a baby brother or sister that is moving into it, and he does not want that to happen. So, he keeps begging his parents for a new room. So we gave them like grids to make a blueprint, and the challenge was that they were going to be architects, and they could create a bedroom any way they wanted with anything in it. And so they got the grid, and they were able to, some people kept asking for more grids. We ended up with a bunch of them all the way around, but this is the basics of it. And they had another sheet that they could cut out the rectangle and the square shapes for arrays, and we learned about arrays. And then after they were done doing this, they counted up the squares to just initiate how to find area on your grid. So that was what we did there. And then they were given this, which is the area sheet. They listed everything that they had in their bedroom and totaled up the area and figured out how to do that. And then we even talked about perimeter, because that wasn't part of it. That is something that is a state criteria for 3rd grade. So we did that. And those are the 2 items.
Excellent. I just want to jump in as usual for the board, because I just think it's so impressive how well you two have extended the 3rd and 4th grade curriculum and the standards, and really enriched it with this STEM class or STEAM class. Well, I don't care what we call it, but we're doing science, and we're doing technology, and we're doing engineering and math, and it's, I mean, as a parent, I've sat there and read Pop's Bridge with the 3rd grade journeys book.
Yeah.
You know, the science, the predator and the prey, same thing, and the science connection and the biology. I know you got a huge background in biology, I think your undergrad's in biology. So, I mean, these are great things, and then to see the artwork, the visual arts, and the construction, the engineering piece. I mean, we talk about all this technology that kids need, and part of my job working with our administrative team is to make sure that we do have the board wants a well-rounded, balanced curriculum, and just not putting kids on technology devices that they're often getting at home all day. The kids are getting to work together, collaborate, envision something, make it come to life, draw connection. And I love what you guys are doing, and I'm glad I got to hear this.
Oh yeah, I love it. Now you feel like as technology takes over, it's kind of the death of the project. You know, we all grew up doing
the
major projects. Yes.
Yeah.
And that's what they'll remember.
Right.
They will remember their time with you, you know, and your tree, with extra mile. They're gonna remember that time we made that bridge, you know, forever. And so that's just so awesome. It's so hands-on. Thank you guys.
And it's just amazing how they go from teaching this class, and then next minute they're doing cafeteria duty, and then they're going in the classrooms and supporting, you know, our struggling students. You know, they just kind of jump in there, and I know, I can speak on behalf of the staff. If the teacher has to step out of the room for a minute, they know that these 2 are quite capable of running the show while they're out. You know what I mean? And I know that whatever's needed, they will jump in. Like last year, they saw a workshop for, you know, STEM training, and they both wanted to go, and we were able to make it happen. So I appreciate that on that end, that they're modeling that lifelong learning to kids as well, and to the staff. And they always come to every staff meeting, you know, and they try to walk away with something that they can make their classroom experiences with kids better. And again, they need their teaching license, and I tell them that every year on their evaluations, you know, but I feel very blessed to have them in the building as well. I know the staff truly respects the work and appreciates all that they do.
And kids are now able to continue this with middle school robotics, pre-engineering classes, career tech programs in our middle school. The high school, we just, next year we'll be implementing the fabrication lab. They received a grant for $50,000, and kids can continue to build and create, you know, at every building at this point. So it's just, good job.
It's nice to give them a little bit of freedom to see what they can create. You don't know what they have inside of them, it just comes out. It's really fun.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Number 7, treasurer's recommendations and reports.
Okay, item A is to approve the February financial statements. Total expense, $11,660,772.99. Of that, just over $8.36 million within the consortium. Not a lot really to report on in February. There's a lot of timing variances due with real estate tax advances beginning to come in. So once March concludes, we'll have a much better comparison on the revenues. Current carryover, almost 4.5 million. Again, February and March are the big cash receipt months, so that's going to climb, and then it'll decrease April through June. One thing that's not on the report I wanted to bring to your attention, basically 95% of the school districts in Ohio are on a state supported software platform. The state is currently phasing that out as of 2022, so all the districts that are on that platform are converting over in waves, and our wave is Friday morning. So Thursday night, the current software will be turned off, and we will be up and running on brand new software Friday morning. We had a pretty intensive 3-day, all-day training last week, so bottom line, not getting too far into the weeds here, but the next report that you see is going to look quite different than what you're used to seeing. So I didn't want you to open up your packet next month and be like, what the heck? So might need some time to fine-tune some things. Unfortunately, the April board meeting, I believe, is on the first Monday instead of the second Monday, but we should be good to go, hopefully. But again, I didn't want you to open up the report next month and not be, at least have a heads up on that. So beyond that, are there any questions on the February financial statements or the checks during the month?
Seeing none, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Abbott, second by Mr. Bratton. Travis?
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
And Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Item B is approve increasing the Bloom Carroll teacher home instructor tutor rate from $25 an hour to $35 an hour. This is simply a housekeeping item. We don't normally get a lot of the teachers that do the home instruction or tutors, so we hire them from outside, and we had been paying that rate at $35 an hour. So this is just to make sure that our teacher rate mirrors what we pay the other home instruction. So,
Any questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion, please? I'll second this one. Travis?
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
And Mr. Jimmy Johnson.
Yes.
I think I called that wrong. Item C is approve authorizing the treasurer to solicit bids for roof replacement repair of the two-story portion of the high school. Within your packet, you have a proposal from Shore Architects, who obviously we're also using for the elementary, and we used for the other portion of the high school roof that we replaced a couple of years ago. You've got the description of what the project will entail, warranty of 10 years. Again, with where we are in our building plan, you see that the recommendation will be the application of this coating. The second page is is the project budget. You see the estimate. Again, this was on the wish list. And then we have a project schedule. We will be if this is approved tonight, advertising for bids this week. One thing that's not on here, there is a pre-bid meeting with all the prospective contractors on March 18th. But if this all goes as planned, we would open bids on March 26th, and the board would approve the lowest successful bidder at our April 6th meeting. So again, this does not lock us in to accepting any bids. It simply allows Mr. Hahn and myself to start the process.
Travis was at training this week. I met with Tony Shore and Dennis Thompson, our maintenance supervisor, and the good news is that it's actually, they've upgraded it. It's a 12-year warranty now, it's not a 10, so we get a couple more years of warranty on that second floor if we move forward.
Any questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Second. Travis?
I'm sorry, who was the second? Okay. Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
And finally, again, it's nice to be able to recognize the following donations to the Bloom Carroll Local School District. Another donation to the BC Athletic Fund, Dan Shirley Memorial, And as you can see, the track and field program has continued their fundraising drive and were able to secure many generous donations for their equipment upgrade.
Any questions? Seeing none, can I get a motion, please?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bratton, second by Mr. Jimmy Johnson. Travis?
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes. Thank you, Travis.
Mhm.
Number 8, old business. A, approve the following policies 1 through 7 as presented. Does anyone have any questions in regards to these policies?
This is the third reading, the third and final reading of them.
Looks good.
I will make this motion.
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Rod Johnson, second by Mrs. Sherman. Travis?
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
All right. Number 9, superintendent's recommendations and reports.
Okay, just a couple things. On Friday, March 6th, we had a professional development day, and some really good sessions addressing our math curriculum as you know, it's re-adoption year. We also looked at reading and math intervention programs to see what changes. We received some feedback over the last year that teachers would like us to maybe go a different direction with the product we're using, and the program we're using for reading and math intervention. So we are looking at a couple options there. Tons of teacher input, and Ms. Raver, our curriculum director, has been leading that. We also had sessions on gifted services. As you know, teachers are required to receive training, 15 hours a year over, and they have to do that 60 total hours, but over 4 years. And so we use that professional development to provide a lot of gifted service training. There were sessions on technology and some legal products, trauma, homelessness training to recognize and identify situations of homelessness, which is mandated training. And then we also worked on our curriculum maps and looking at the standards. Teachers were working at grade levels or within departments, kind of finalizing their curriculum map so you can see what standards students are learning each quarter, and then we'll eventually get all these and organize them on our website under our curriculum page where a parent, if you have a child going in 5th grade during the summer, you want to go see what they're going to be learning and when, you can see what standards, what topics, pacing guides in terms of how many days roughly a teacher thinks they'll need to spend on this for a typical student. And so we're working on getting our curriculum map pacing guides done in all K-12 classes. Okay. So that's what went on March 6th. It was a good day. Just a reminder, The Lion King Junior is a middle school play coming up. There's main focus is middle school, but there's kids from multiple grade levels participating, and it's amazing the work they do. If you get a chance, stop by for the play. You can purchase tickets online. It's going to be March 12th through the 14th, and I believe it's March 12th at 7:30, the 15th at 7:30, and the 14th on Saturday at 6 in the evening. So that's coming up this weekend and Thursday night as well. PDQ, the Policy Development Quarterly, we scheduled a policy committee meeting with Mrs. Sherman, Mr. Abbott from March 17th at 10 a.m. That'll start the new batch of policy updates that we need. The end of the 3rd grading period, not only for your own children, but our school district, target lead is March 20th, and then we're down to 45% of 46 student days. So it's really busy this time of year for us. And then March 18th, Mr. Johnson and I are planning to attend the Rally for Public Schools. It's the Ed Choice opposition, but it's really a rally to support public schools. I do feel like public schools are continuing to get pushed aside a bit with some decisions being made at the state level, and I think our public schools are strong and are doing a very good job, and our teachers and students are doing well. There are areas that we all need to improve, but we'll be there to support public schools on the West Lawn of the State House at between 3 to 5 p.m. on the 18th. The high school ACT, all juniors by state law are required, we are required to provide one testing opportunity for high school juniors, and that'll take place tomorrow morning at the high school. They have an alternate schedule, they kind of close off an area for quiet testing in the high school, but that'll be taking place tomorrow. We see more good news, with recognition within our art program, the Ohio Governor's Youth Art Exhibition. It will be taking place here soon, and there's about 11,500 entries of student artwork from across the state, and ultimately 2,500 pieces are selected to enter into state judging. And then after that, once they enter state judging, 300 pieces of artwork will be displayed at the Governor's Youth Art Exhibition. And the good news is we have 5 students at our high school that have met gone from 11,500 entries down to the 2,500, so they are being considered to be actually put on display. And we have had students before that have had artwork at the Youth Art Exhibition, or the Ohio Governor's Youth Art Exhibition. So just want to recognize Megan Connor, Max Mullins, Seth Mullins, Caitlin Goff, and Jensen Payne are all being considered, their pieces are all being considered. So big thing going on right now. I know you're going to be getting questions about it. It's constantly evolving every day. It's not fun to deal with right now, but it's this coronavirus outbreak, global outbreak, has not been designated a pandemic yet. But I just checked, since when I left my office, Ohio still had 0 confirmed cases. When I logged in here and checked the Ohio Department of Health's website, Ohio now has 3 confirmed cases. So it is spreading. To what extent? I wish I had a crystal ball and could tell you what this is going to look like, but I'm just like the rest of you. I'm following the Center of Disease Control, the Ohio Department of Health, the Fairfield Department of Health as well. I will continue to work with local and state health officials. Just so you know, I did communicate last Monday with our community after hearing a lot the previous weekend. I knew that it was going to start kind of blowing up literally in terms of a management perspective. But we have reviewed our emergency operational plans for medical pandemics. We are not anywhere close right now to needing to shut down. If this thing got out of control, that order might come from a state or local agency that has the authority to shut schools down. We can shut schools down I can make that decision to do that. We're not anywhere close. I check our attendance daily. Our attendance actually has been better in the last month than it has in a typical winter. We're around sometimes 4 to 7% absent. And then you got to look at the number of students that are actually absent for personal illness, with fevers. And kids are absent because they go on vacation. Kids are absent because they have doctor's appointments and they run out for an hour and come back to school. But if I just look at the actual personal illnesses for this time of year, our numbers are really low. We're around 7%, and anything under 10 is really good in terms of absences. So if you get questions about that, just know I'm going to continue to work on this, but I will be meeting with our administrative team on Thursday. I emailed them today to tell them to start thinking about some questions and solutions. If the state came along and said, we're shutting down schools for 2 weeks or even longer, how are we going to handle that? So we will be having those discussions. There's a lot of different options. We also have to look at the number of hours in a school year and what we're required to make up. If we would potentially drop below that, would we make it up? Would we go to an online option, which the state would authorize, or they do authorize now? We use Blizzard bags. The things we have done, people ask, what are we doing? Well, notice we have reviewed our emergency operation plans. The administrative team is working, worked with the teachers as well to come up with some kind of game plan. I probably will be communicating later at the end of this week or early next, depending on how things go with an update. But we are frequently disinfecting high touch point surfaces with disinfectants effective against infectious diseases, including the coronavirus. Things like tabletop surfaces, keyboards, sinks, drinking fountains, door handles, school bus seats, things that little people touch. We have provided antibacterial soap that we purchased in all the restrooms. We have encouraged good hygiene and hand washing almost obsessively. We are, got a little catch here, providing disinfectant wipe style classrooms. We received a few cases, but they're on back order, as you can imagine, from our supplier. So, if you go to the store, they're out as well. So we are waiting for our order to come in, and hopefully that will be soon, but our maintenance supervisor, custodial supervisor is doing a good job getting that stuff out. We are providing wipes and hand sanitizer with at least 60% alcohol for athletic events, which we were hosting. We had some teams come in to our district, Keith and DeSales. We had another game, I believe, but we provided disinfectant wipes for locker rooms, benches, hand sanitizer, those types of things. So again, we'll look at how to best go about this with the learning management system and online lessons if we would need to. I'm looking at the total number of Chrome devices or tablets, Chromebooks, laptops that use a Chrome operating system. We have a learning management system called Schoology for grades 5 through 12. And we already have some Blizzard bags made for Calamity Day assignments. We typically do Calamity Day assignments for Blizzard bags on the 3rd, 5th, and 8th snow day of the school year. Well, we've only had to use what we used as SDR for part of the first Blizzard bag. So we already have the 5th day done and the 8th day done. We will have to talk about how we're going to move forward if we get in a situation where the state comes along and shuts schools down. Staff members are being paid, or how are we gonna handle this if people are working from home? Do they come in? There's just a lot of things to think about. So I don't know if you guys have any questions about that. We have a trip to Washington, D.C. Coming up in 2 months with 8th graders. There's cancellation policies and things. Parents have paid deposits. The board approved the trip a year ago. Tough decision. I think we use some common sense, but we got baseball going to Myrtle Beach. It was very great. We're going to be approving I'm going to ask you to approve a trip to the Wilds out in Zanesville, and that's all local travel. But when you start talking about our kids are not flying, they're not going to another country. There's relatively close travel. So you're going to start getting, what are you guys doing? And I just want you to have some thought process and to know that we are working on it, and we will develop more details later this week. I'm not sitting here twiddling my thumbs, but it's hard to really know. We've got a plan, but what's that exactly going to look like? I have an idea, but not the details yet. Any questions? All right, let's move on to B, students and programs. Number 1, approve the 2020-21 high school registration guide. We do that early because we got to start registering for courses for next year and with our 8th graders and 9th graders. Number 2, approve the following 2020-21 assessment staggered start schedule for kindergarten. A, August 20th, 21st, 24th, 25th, 2020, to conduct assessment appointments for individual students. And then on August 26th and 7th, 2020, the kindergarten gets split in half. It just makes a much easier start for the little ones to not be overwhelmed on their first day of school. And then August 28th would be the first full day for all the students. It's a Friday, 1 day all together, and then they get a weekend, and then they kind of come back ready for Monday. So that would be the kindergarten schedule. It's always a little bit different than all the other grade levels. Number 3, approve a trip for the high school science club to the Wilds in Cumberland, Ohio, from April 25th through the 26th, 2020. Be chaperoned by Joe Carter, Joe Rashawn, and Diane Gabriel, pending receipt and approval of the volunteer background form. Number 4, approve an out-of-state trip and trip itinerary for the high school marching band to Orlando, Florida, November 19th through 23rd, 2021. We do this really early because they can't start fundraising until the board approves the trip. So it's a long way away. Hopefully we aren't dealing with any outbreak at any time at that time.
Any questions for Mr. Hunt? Seeing none, can I get a motion, please?
So moved.
Motion made by Mr. Abbott, second by Mr. Bratton. Travis?
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes. Okay, 9C, personnel and employment. Number 1, approve substitute list number 7 for March 2020 as submitted by the Fairfield County ESC. Number 2, approve the following personnel to provide kindergarten screening June 1st through the 3rd, 2020 at the tutor hourly rate. Obviously, this is after the contract ends, as presented A through J. Number 3, approve the following personnel kindergarten screening assistants on June 3rd, 2020 at the regular hourly rate. That would be for Carmen Spellman and Tony Stadler from our transportation department. They help with assisting teachers on that day and students. Number 4, approve Brett Mitchell to provide 72 hours of home instruction for a high school student at the tutor hourly rate for the 1920 school year. Number 5, approve Christopher Hughes to provide 2 hours of home instruction for a middle school student at the tutor hourly rate for the 1920 school year. Number 6, approve the following classified substitutes for the remainder of the 1920 school year. Kate Kimple as a custodian, John Laird as a custodian, and Richard Black as a bus driver. Number 7, approve the following request for an unpaid leave and dock day. That would be a maximum of 2 days, which is now permitted by board policy for Stephanie Dinsmore on April 23rd and 24th, 2020. Number 8, approve the following athletic supplemental contract for the 1920 school year for John Norman with varsity assistant track and Robin Cottle, varsity assistant boys tennis. Number 9, approve the following athletic department volunteers for the 1920 school year, pending timely receipt of all verifications and background checks. Steve Muck with middle school softball. Finally, number 10, approve the following volunteers for the 1920 school year, pending successful background check results. Your Group A volunteers with background checks on file. Those are in your packet, so that's it.
Great. Thanks, Sean. Any questions?
No.
Seeing none, may I get a motion, please?
Second.
Motion made by Mrs. Sherman, second by Mr. Jimmy Johnson. Travis?
Mrs. Sherman?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.
Nothing under contract agreements, nothing under E other, and nothing under personnel resignations or retirement. So long as it's on.
And 10, new business. Nothing at this time. All right. 11, board reports and information. A, board education liaison, I think, please. Facility management, Mr. Bratton, or I'm sorry, Mr. Abbott and Mr. Johnson. We met on Friday, and really the weather's delayed a lot of the projects for the new build. So they're pouring concrete, actually, there's some sites just went up here past day, so it's starting to really, a lot of traffic out there too.
Yeah, I'm sorry, yeah, totally, there's a million other things going on. I didn't give you guys an update. On Friday, we just had a meeting. Everything is on, the early side is on schedule. Current schedule, bedrock earthworks, the water line will be to the site by March 11th. I was out there today, the water line is now at the site. They were finishing the water line, so they're a couple days ahead there. The concrete for the middle part of the building, called Part B for construction purposes. Houston Plumbing continues setting cleanouts and drains. Proline Electric is continuing underground and rough ends back in the mechanical area behind the gym. And IMI Masonry, they have the walls up on the Brzezinski's 3 to 5 area, and the walls
I saw that today.
walls are going up on the K2 area as well. They're going to start the sanitary line probably in the next couple days, weather permitting. Thompson Concrete will be back on the 12th and 17th for the back section. Houston Plumbing will continue to rough ends. Proline Electric will be working on a mechanical underground electric. The masons are going to move to the middle section and get bearing walls done, and H&A will start laying out mechanical openings for the masonry walls where outlets and things go. So everything so far is good, and we stay on schedule. I feel better with the water line to the site now, and I know South Central Power is out there and getting ready to install the poles for the 3-phase electric. So we're doing okay with the facility.
Great.
Sorry, I forgot that, guys.
Thank you, Mr. On. Number 2, personnel and labor management, Mr. Bratton, Mr. Jimmy Johnson.
Nothing new.
Great. Number 3, OSBA representative, Mr. Hahn and Mr. Bigham and myself are attending on the 18th, we have legislative conference in the morning. That day, and you're more than welcome. I think there's still some time up there. I just saw it when I was looking at OSBA stuff the other day. Actually, I think it'll be a good conference, actually. I'll talk a little bit about hopefully, well, it is, where it's at, so it should be a pretty good meeting. We will report back next month. Number 4, policy. Mr. Abbott?
The next meeting is on 3/17, 20 at 10 a.m.
Number 5, safety, health, and wellness. Mr. Abbott and Mr. Jimmy Johnson.
Nothing new.
We do have a meeting, we do have a meeting later next week. I believe it is in, if I know the calendar, I'm sorry, we've got a safety, health, and wellness meeting in May, I believe, so I will follow up. I'm sorry, I lied to you. It's April 20th, in the afternoon. I'll get you the exact time, but it's Monday the 20th. Just
For wellness?
Yes, it's health and wellness.
Okay, number 6, finance, Mr. Brad. I know we were gonna get together, Mr. Bigham, in regards to the state auditors.
Yeah, just fine tuning a couple things, maybe in April.
Maybe April.
Just a quick meeting. Yeah.
Okay. Great. D, the upcoming PTO booster and Board of Education meetings. Tomorrow, we have the middle school PTO at 2:30 in the media center at the middle school. We also have the BC Elementary PTO at 6:30, actually in this building in the library. 3:16, the music boosters at 6:30 in the media center in the high school. 3:18, we have the high school PTO meeting at 7 o'clock in the high school cafeteria. May 25th, we have the Board of Education planning session back at the middle school library. And then on April 6th, the Board of Education regular meeting back at the middle school library. Any questions? May I get a motion to adjourn?
Second.
Motion made by Mr. Bratt and seconded by Mr. Abbott. Time now is 6:57.
Mr. Bratton?
Yes.
Mr. Abbott?
Yes.
Mr. Jimmy Johnson?
Yes.
Mrs. Sherman? Mr. Rod Johnson?
Yes.